everyone! Today's sew-along is for a comfortable, voluminous dress with dropped shoulders, flowy ruffle sleeves, pockets, and a reversible neckline. This pattern is free and available to download at peppermintmag.com or via the link in the description box below. I hope you grab yourself a copy and sew it along with me. Let's get started. You will need 2 front bodice pieces mirrored. I'm choosing to add interfacing to the placket areas of the front bodice to add additional support for when I go to add the buttonholes and buttons. I've cut them to measure the length of my center front bodice by 2 inches, and I've cut 2 of them. And 1 back bodice cut on the fold, 2 sleeve ruffles cut on the fold, 2 skirts cut on the fold, 2 pairs of pockets, 1 back neck facing cut on the fold, which I'm also choosing to interface with 1 piece cut on the fold, 2 front neck facings mirrored with optional interfacing, and 4 small buttons. If your material is quite thin, like the rayon challis I've chosen to use for this dress, and you're also planning to interface, go ahead and interface the wrong sides of your placket now, as well as all of your neckline facing pieces. Now place your front and back bodice pieces right sides together and pin your shoulder seams, and then sew your shoulder seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then finish with your preferred method, either your serger or a zigzag stitch. Then place your neckline facings right sides together and pin those shoulder seams. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Once they're attached, go ahead and finish all of the outside edges of this facing with your zigzag stitch or a serger. Now we're going to attach the facing to our main bodice, placing the inner unfinished edge of the neckline alongside the bodice edges, matching your shoulder seams and the front openings. Go ahead and pin, and then sew all around the neckline with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now that the neckline is sewn on, we're going to make small clips all along the neck edge so the facing folds back nicely to the inside. Clip very close to your stitching line, but make sure not to clip through it. And also clip to but not through the back V of our neckline. Once we've clipped into this neckline and removed some of the bulk from the seam allowance, we can flip the facing to the inside of the garment. Give it a really good press. Once it's nicely pressed, we'll be ready to top stitch all along this serged edge of the facing all around the neckline. So I'm just going to pin my facing in place all the way around, and now that it's pinned, I'm ready to take it to my machine. I'm going to be sewing the facing to the neckline with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along this serged edge all the way around. Now let's create our button plackets. We're going to take our center front openings to the ironing board, press them to the inside by 3/8 of an inch, and then again 1.5 inches. I've gone ahead and pressed this side already, so I have this pressed edge at 3/8 of an inch, and then I pressed it one more time with that 3/8 inch pressed under 1.5 inches and gave that a really good press. Do that for both sides. Once both of your plackets are nicely pressed, pin them in place and edge stitch close to both folded edges. Once your plackets are complete, overlap the left placket over the right by 4 inches, pin in place, and then baste the 2 plackets together with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. Before we attach our sleeves, we're going to serge or zigzag both sleeve edges of the bodice separately, and also serge or zigzag all 4 edges of both sleeve pieces. Take your sleeve to your sewing machine and baste one of the long edges from beginning to end so that we can gather it and attach it to the bodice. Use the longest stitch on your machine, leaving tails at either end so that you have thread to pull for gathering. And now we're going to get ready to attach that sleeve to this finished sleeve edge of our bodice piece. On the pattern piece for both of the bodice pieces, there's a little notch indicating where your sleeve will begin and end. So I'm marking both of those sleeve placement notches with a pin on both ends. Now I'll grab my sleeve piece and folding it in half, Mark the center of my sleeve with a pin. This will be the point that I pin the sleeve to the shoulder seam of my bodice. Placing your sleeve and your bodice right sides together, pin at your shoulder marking and the shoulder seam. And now start gathering your sleeve at one end so that the sleeve now fits between your bodice sleeve notch and the shoulder seam. Once it's distributed evenly, go ahead and pin. Once it's pinned, do the same for the other side. Once that sleeve is completely pinned to the arm portion of the bodice, we're ready to sew it in place. Note that we will be starting and stopping our stitching 3/8 of an inch above where the sleeve ends. We're going to need this 3/8 of an inch space for when we sew the sleeves together on either end. So start your stitching at this 3/8 marking on this side and on the opposite side of your sleeve. And now we're ready to sew. Now both of my sleeves are gathered and attached, and we've left that 3/8 of an inch open at either end of each sleeve. Then fold your sleeve right sides together and go ahead and pin the underarm seam. Do this for both sleeves and sew them with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now my underarm seam is sewn. Now I'm going to pin together the remainder of that side seam of the bodice right sides together and sew it with a 3/8 inch seam allowance so that it just meets the stitching that I ended with when I sewed the underarm seams together. And do this for both side seams. To hem the bottom of your sleeves, you're going to fold it over 3/8 of an inch and press, and then fold it again 3/8 of an inch and press all the way around. Now that I've pressed those sleeve hems 3/8 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch again, I'm going to pin or clip it in place all the way around. Then I'm going to edge stitch close to this inner fold. Do this for both sleeves. To prepare the pockets, finish all 4 outer edges of each pocket with our serger or a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Finish each seam separately. And once you're done finishing the outer curves of all your pockets, we can prepare the side seams of our skirt so that we can attach the pockets to them. For both of the skirt panels, serge or zigzag both of your side seams and do this for both skirt panels. Now I'm going to take each finished edge of my skirt and transfer the pocket notches marked on my pattern piece with a pin, and then take one of my pockets right sides together with a skirt and pin it between those 2 notches. Do this for both sets of pockets for your front and your back skirt panel, and then sew each pocket seam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now here is one of my skirt pieces. I'm bunching it up here so that you can see both of my pockets. From the right side of my skirt, I've pressed both pockets out to the outside, and now I'm going to take my other skirt piece and place it right sides together with this one, and pin along each side seam and pocket area. So I've pinned from the top of the skirt all around the pocket and then continuing down the rest of the side seam to the bottom of the skirt. I'm going to sew it this exact way with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure to keep this section of the pocket opening free. Do this for both side seams and pockets. Now both of my pockets are sewn, and I'm ready to baste the top of my skirt all the way around with the longest stitch on my machine, leaving thread tails at the beginning and end of my stitching so that I can pull them together, just as we did for the sleeves. Baste the top of your skirt, and then we'll be ready to attach it to the bodice. Once you're done basting the entire top edge of the skirt, mark your center front and center back with a pin, and grab your bodice piece, and mark the bottom center front and center back of your bodice, and then place your skirt and your bodice pieces right sides together, match the pins, and then also match both side seams. Gather from side seam to center front and back all around the skirt. Once each gathered portion of the skirt fits that bodice area, pin them together. Continue all the way around. And once it's pinned all the way around, go ahead and sew the 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then finish your seam with your serger or a zigzag stitch. Now all we have left to do is to hem the very bottom of our dress, add our buttonholes and buttons, and then we're all done. To hem the bottom of our dress, it's going to be the same as when we did our sleeves, except we're going to press it once 3/8 of an inch, and then one more time, double that, about 6/8 of an inch. And then pin and edge stitch all around your garment close to the inner fold. And the very last step is to add our buttonholes and sew on our buttons. I've placed pins on my right placket where I want my buttonholes to start and stop. And I've spaced each button about 2¼ inches away from each other. Using these pins as my guide, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and sew on my buttonholes. And now for the buttons, I've gone ahead and opened each buttonhole, pinned my plackets right over left. And then what I like to do is just find the center of that buttonhole and use it as a guide to place a pin on the left placket right where I'm going to be centering my button. And then when I unpin the plackets from each other, I'm left with the pins on the left placket that show me where to center my buttons. So now I can sew on each of my 4 buttons. And then our dress is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe for more videos and sewing inspiration. I'll see you next time.